Okay, so let's get started with 10 tips on how to improve your real estate website. So the first thing is an overall just high arcing theme for this course will be you always need to focus on the user. In other words, it's not about what you personally like, the design style you prefer, or colors you like. It's always the user you got to think of first, the consumer, because if the consumer likes your website, they'll spend more time there, and therefore, hopefully, you'll get the lead in the business. So it's not one of our 10 tips, but always think about the user first, not your personal interests. So the first tip we're going to give you is just what are the current website design trends that are really hot right now. So the first thing is it's all about being light and bright in the design. In other words, a couple of years ago, you were seeing much darker backgrounds, darker color schemes in web design, and now you're seeing much lighter colors. Whites and silvers and very light colors are the major emphasis, even up in the header. And then you can use pictures and imagery and video to pop out and give it emphasis. But the overall design style for the right now, when it comes to your color schemes, is light and bright for the major colors of your site and the backgrounds as well. Another design kind of trend you're seeing is what's called the one-page homepage layout. In other words, 2-3 years ago, homepages were really trying to fit into one screen. You didn't want somebody to really scroll it all on your homepage. What you're seeing now is a very long scrolling homepage. And the reason for this is just kind of going back to making the user happy. First of all, users don't really use the navigation, the buttons at the top of the site that often. Sometimes they miss them, they don't really pay attention to them. So what a one-page homepage does is as they scroll down the page, each section as they scroll down would be another area of the main navigation you're highlighting. So as you move down the page, where it might have your little bio and your information about how to get a hold of you, that might be promoting the About button up in your header. Where it has your featured properties in the property search, that's going to promote your property area. You might have another section kind of highlighting the buyers and the sellers. So the idea is as I scroll down the page, it's almost like I'm getting a preview of the entire site as I move down the homepage. So that's a big trend right now, the one-page homepage layout, and it also works very well for mobile devices. The second major trend is everything you do these days, you've got to be thinking about mobile first. And also when it comes to design, you want to do something called responsive, which I'll explain more in a second. So first of all, when it comes to mobile, we're in the middle of the craziest technology explosion ever. The original iPhone came out in late 2007, and just in the last 8+ years, our phones and now our tablets have become amazing compared to the devices of the past. And this has changed the entire internet, not just real estate online. But first of all, mobile internet traffic is already exceeding computer internet traffic. And that's true in the real estate world as well. Over half the traffic now comes from a phone or a tablet. But in the real estate world, it really is the better half of your traffic. And what I mean by that is Google and NAR did a huge joint study together called the Zero Moment of Truth. And one of the major things they found is, depending on the screen size somebody is using to look at your website, it tells you how serious and how far along they are in the process. And what I mean by that is real estate is always considered a 13-month period. From the time someone starts thinking about buying or selling their property to the time when they do it is typically considered 13 months. Well, if they're on a regular computer, a desktop or a laptop computer, you can consider them very early in the 13-month period, and they're not very serious when they're looking at your website on a big screen. But once they start using mobile devices, phones and tablets, now they're within 3 months of a buying or selling decision, and those are really your more serious leads you're going to get off the internet, are people coming from a mobile device. So that's a huge factor. Mobile traffic is actually better than regular computer traffic. And this was already a huge factor before April 21st of 2015. And if you don't know what this is, Google, by the way, the media came up with the name Mobile Get It On. Google didn't give it that name. The media, TV and newspapers and magazines, they're the ones that came up with that name. Google basically just said, we're making the biggest change we've ever made to our search engine. So Google constantly makes small tweaks to the search engine algorithm, how they rank a website. But April 21st of last year was the biggest change they've ever made. It basically said, from this point on, if your website is not mobile friendly, in other words, you can't pass that test, the link I've given you here at the bottom, if you can't pass the mobile friendly test, your website is now basically way out of the rankings on Google. So your website could have been page one on April 20th of last year, but if it didn't pass the test on April 21st, you could be way behind every single site that passes the test. They move ahead of you in the rankings. So if you want to write that down, but of course I'll give you the link later. You can always watch this webinar again. But it's google.com/webmasters with an S /tools with an S /mobile-friendly. And don't worry, it'll be on the next couple slides as well. But basically, if I go to that link, all I got to do is type in any website address and I click Analyze. And once I click Analyze, it usually takes about 30 seconds for this to complete. And all Google does is they say, let's go see what your website looks like on a mobile phone screen, because they know how important the phone is these days. And if you pass, they'll say, awesome, you're mobile friendly, and you still have a chance to show up higher in the rankings out on Google. But if you fail, they'll tell you failed, and here's all the reasons why. Your text is too small to read, your links are too close together, your mobile viewport is not set. In other words, your website is not built for mobile at all. You have an old website, and all it really means is, and this is the easiest way to know you're going to fail, if there's any pinching and zooming at all on your website on a phone screen, you're immediately going to fail this test with Google. So mobile was already a huge factor, but now that Google made this huge change, it's the biggest factor. So if you don't know what I mean by your website has to be mobile friendly, there's 4 different ways to build a website or a blog to make it show up on a mobile device, and I'm going to explain it from worst to best. Worst case scenario is an old website, an old HTML website, and that's where you have to pinch and zoom to use it, and it looks very tiny if you don't do the pinching and zooming. And like I just showed you a second ago, if your website is a pinch and zoom site, you'll fail immediately. Tied for the worst is when a vendor tells you, well, we're going to give you an app for your website. Even though it's number 2, I really think it's tied for the worst, because that app does not go into the app stores. Basically, they're going to give you a link, and the only people that ever be able to use your link is people who give the link to. So, in other words, maybe your current clients will use that link to use your app, but you're never going to get new business off an app for a website. So that's why I say it's kind of tied for the worst with just being an old website. Number 3 is what's called mobile version. And this will look and feel like an app. So it's not going to be your entire website. It's just going to be a few pages on your website or a few major functions of your site. But the key is there's no link they have to go click and download. The split second somebody goes to your site, they check to see what kind of device they're on. And if they're on a regular computer, they'll show them the full website. If they're on a mobile device, they'll show them a stripped down version of your site that looks and feels like an app. So it's way better than the first 2 because this all happens automatically, but it's not your entire site experience. It's only a mini version of it. And typically at the bottom, there'll be a click to view the full website, and then they would go right back to number 1, an old standard HTML website with the pinching and zooming. So it's way better than the first 2, but it's still not the best thing. What is the best thing these days is what's called responsive design. In other words, in that split second somebody checks to see what kind of a device you're on, instead of showing them a stripped down version of your site, we're going to show them the entire site. If your site really has 72 pages, we'll show them all 72 pages. If your site has gorgeous design and animation, they'll still see the same gorgeous design and animation, even on a little phone screen. But what they basically do is they reformat it. Instead of it being a wide website with 3 columns, they'll move column 2 under column 1 and column 3 under column 2, and they'll just reformat it to be a longer scrolling page. But your fonts are all very easy to read. Your buttons, your menu is very easy. It's just the 3 little lines up in the corner. So no matter what screen size somebody is on, if it's a responsive design built site, your site is built to work on any screen size. Google 100% prefers this. They give you major points in the search engine if you have responsive design, and it means that customers are going to have the best experience no matter what device they're using. So that's really what you're shooting for these days, is called responsive design. Tip number 3 we're going to give you are some current search trends, like the searches on your website. So first of all, when you have your homepage search, the major trend here is less is more. In other words, even on a homepage search, a couple years ago you were seeing kind of pretty complex search forums with a lot of different features and buttons and things for somebody to play with on the homepage of a site. But if you look at any of the major websites in the industry these days, go to a site like Zillow or Trulia or Realtor.com or any of the big franchise sites, They don't have a big search form on the homepage. They have what's called a single bar search, where it's just one field, somebody types in something, but that single box is smart and dynamic, meaning I could type a city, a zip code, an address, an MLS number. I can type a lot of different things into that box. And as you start typing, if I start typing in MI, it's not just going to populate the cities, Miami, Miami Beach, Miami Shores, things like that, but also subdivisions with that name in it and all those different kinds of things. So it's a smart single box search, and that's a big key because the less fields you show somebody, the more likely they are to use that search. So less is more on your homepage search. Once they go inside your site and they do like your whole property search, the less is more trend carries over here as well. So in other words, you're not really seeing gigantic search forms like you used to a couple years ago with tons of fields and drop downs for people to play with. Kind of very similar to what you would see inside an MLS system. Well, the key is a realtor practices how to use a search form in their MLS, but the more fields you show a customer, the more intimidated they get. So even on your major search on your site, you don't want to give them a ton of features, a ton of things to play with in the search. It's much more about filtering things down. And what really is happening here is the real estate industry is finally catching up to the rest of the shopping world. And what I mean by that, when you go to a site like Amazon, Amazon doesn't give you a gigantic search form. It's all about filters. Or let's say you're shopping for a hotel or for a flight. You're not really going through tons of fields. It's sort by price, sort by size, sort by date, and things like that. You're just kind of sorting things down to make a huge set of results into a smaller number. So let's say I apply a location to my search and it goes from 50,000 listings down to 20,000. And then I add in a price range. Now it drops it down to 3,000. And then I add in a property type. Now maybe I'm down to 500. So the key is just let the customer kind of whittle down the numbers by filters, not with a big old search form. So that is completely true with your homepage search and your interior searches. And another little tip for you related to your search is I always highly recommend setting up what are called pre-filtered, or some companies call this drill down searches. In other words, don't make somebody mess with a search form. You might want to pre-build some searches onto your site where they don't have to do anything. They click, if they want to look at every property in a certain subdivision, they click on the name of the subdivision, and then right away they see every listing in that subdivision. Or if they just want to look at waterfront property or whatever it is they're looking for, you pre-build searches onto your site so the customer doesn't have to do them. So some ideas you might want to explore here. First, you could build some searches based by property type. They may not want to mess with everything. Maybe they just want to look at condos separately. Maybe they just want to look at apartments or land or whatever it might be. Another big category customers search by these days is geography-based searches. Some people search by cities, by subdivisions, by areas of your market, by downtown or by near the beach. So you might want to think of doing some geography searches. Customers really shop that way these days. A third category, and this is by far the biggest driver if you're looking for the younger generational client, they're all about lifestyle decisions. They want to know about school zones. They want to know about short commutes to work. Will they be able to go out near good shopping and eating? They like gated communities for safety. So lifestyle searches are big time these days, especially with the younger generational buyers. And then fourth category is kind of that price conscious shopper. A lot of people say I can only afford something in this price range. Or maybe I'm looking for a fixer-upper, or I think I'm going to get a deal on a distressed property, or just price reductions. So a lot of customers these days shop by price. And I'm in no way saying you got to build every single idea up on the screen into your website. What I'm really recommending is think of who your client is, your desired client, and then build a search on your site to match up with that kind of client. So let's say I'm going after a high-end luxury clientele. Then I need to start building pages on my site for waterfront, for gated, for golf communities, for luxury. If I start building all these luxury, high-end based searches into my sites, first of all, it will probably attract more high-end people there. If they do get to your site, they're way more likely to spend more time there because they're going to jump right into the searches that are built for them. You're also hoping they're going to brag and tell some of their other wealthy friends about it. And the other thing you're doing at the same time is this is a big feature from a search engine standpoint, from a Google standpoint. If you set up all these pages on your site with every gated community and all the waterfront and all the golf communities and everything else onto your site, well, Google's going to see tons of luxury content on your site every single day because it's seeing these pre-built searches with all the listings in them with all that great keywords. So building out these pre-built or drill down pages is huge for customers, and it's also great for your search engine ranking as well. And by the way, another little tip for you, not every vendor does this, but when you do a search, most real estate website vendors, you get to the bottom of the page of the first page of results, and you got to click to go to page 2 of results, and then page 3. Well, every time somebody has to click to go to a new page, they're having to make a decision. Do I want to keep going or do I want to go somewhere else? And sometimes people say, all right, I'll give up after the first page or 2. And not only that, if you have to click to go from page to page of listings, Google's never going to read more than the first page. They're not going to click on page 2. So another cool kind of tip for you that you might want to look into is what's called lazy loading. So lazy, L-A-Z-Y, loading, L-O-A-D-I-N-G. Lazy loading, it basically means when they get to the bottom of the page of listings, they're not going to have to click to go to page 2. It'll just start loading in more listings into the page. So they really just stay on the same page the entire time. It just keeps loading in more and more listings. And this is no different than what you experience if you go to a site like Facebook. As you get to the bottom of the page on Facebook, it just keeps adding in more and more. So lazy loading allows the customer to stay on the search longer and look at more properties and not have to make that decision do they want to quit. Plus, from a search engine standpoint, it allows Google to index or kind of check out way more listings because a lot of listings now show up on page 1. Typically, Google can index up to 1,000 listings at once, which is pretty sweet. Tip number 4 is we also got to think about the design and the layout of our site as well. So what we're talking about here basically is when you look at it, talk to a website company, most website companies these days have libraries of designs you can choose from, or they might say, oh, or pay us more and we can do a custom design for you. So the advice we're giving you here, first of all, is when you're either looking at design or you're planning one out, always look for balance in the design itself. And what I mean by that is no matter how your site is laid out, it's going to have 2 parts to it. There's the inside content area. That's where all the really important stuff is. That's where they do searches and look at properties, and that's where they learn. All happens in the middle. So we got to make sure we have a really nice presentation of that middle area. And the other part of your design is whatever wraps around it. So we want a really nice looking site wrapping around our content area, but we need to make sure we're making a good display of that middle content area, the yellow area. You also got to think when you're planning out a site, I got to make sure that I'm really promoting myself well. So the branding of your site should always be strong in the header. Make sure if it's an agent site, your name and maybe your picture and your contact info is up there. If there's anything you want them to contact you or log into their own account, you might want to think, how can that be built into the design? Don't make them hunt around how to get a hold of you or how to log into their own account. So important information should always be very high up and factored into the design. You also want to make sure it's easy for customers to get around. So just make sure when you're doing a site that you're paying good attention to how the navigation, the buttons are laid out. Is it going to be easy for people to use your site with the navigation? And a key to your navigation is always make sure it's consistent. It should be in the same place in the same order on every page. What can annoy people is when they go from one page to another and things change. Buttons appear or disappear or move around on them. And a kind of a goal for you to shoot for is to have between 5 and 15 buttons in your navigation. In other words, if there's too few buttons, people get the initial reaction your site's weak and they're going to be done with it very quickly. If there's too many buttons, it can scare them off thinking your site is too big and take too long to use. So if you're in between the 5 and 15, it's kind of your sweet spot of nice, strong site, but not too much where you're going to scare them off. But it is mean when you have 15 buttons. I'm sure you've seen rollover buttons where they move their mouse over a button and other buttons come out of it. That allows you to have a big site, but not have a gigantic navigation they see. Also, just put a little thought into organizing the buttons themselves. It should be easy for somebody to find something on your site within a click or two. If it's not, you might want to ask your tech support person to help you organizing your buttons. And then just when it comes to orientation, should your buttons be horizontal or vertical? Typically, the trend here in real estate is definitely horizontal. The buttons should go side to side. And the major reason is, if I'm using horizontal buttons, I now have the entire width of the screen below it for the content area. And the reason that's important is real estate searches and real estate search result displays of all the properties on a screen and clicking into a property and seeing all the photos and information on it, it takes up a lot of width of a screen to do real estate. So horizontal is definitely the trend these days of having your buttons going side to side. And then design don'ts you need to avoid. Be very careful of doing too much animation on your site and strong colors. Okay, it's okay to have powerful colors on the outside in the design frame, but always avoid color in the content area. Okay, see how that over on the right, that design has brown background and a white font. It's very hard to read. You would definitely want to make it where that would not happen. Also, I always say avoid what I call drama. And this is something that most realtors just don't know because they don't have web design training. But we're used to reading normal size fonts, dark fonts on a light background. And that's what you should really use at all times. And only maybe for headers of pages or certain words, make those bolded or colored or stand out. If you do that, people's eyes will go right to it. But if you do too much of too big of fonts or whatever, it loses the emphasis. And then too much scrolling, other than that single page, homepage design, if there's too many words on the screen, some people will quit the second they see a long scroll bar and a lot of words. So be careful of that. And just be careful of music and video on your site. The key is make the person click on it and start it. Don't ever spring music or video on somebody. Tip number 6 is you always need to focus on content, especially local content. And what I mean by this is most of the times you sign up for a website these days, they're going to give you content. They're going to give you buyers information and sellers information. But to make somebody stay on your site for an extended period of time, you need to have original content you're adding there as well. So it could be great information about your local community. It could be stuff about the real estate process. You really need to think, what can I put on this site that's not on everyone else's site? And that way Google will pay more attention to it. So the more local niche content you have, the better off you are. And I know a lot of realtors resist blogging. They think it's going to be a gigantic time suck. It really isn't. But blogging really means you're committing to add content to your site all the time. And if you're a consistent, good blogger, you can move to the top of a search engine pretty quickly, because that's exactly what Google wants at the top of the rankings, is good information, new, fresh information written by somebody who's very passionate about a topic. And that's really what a blog is all about. You're blogging about a topic you're very interested in, and you're adding new content to it all the time. So original content, local content, and blogging are keys to keeping a customer on your site and coming back. Tip number 7 is that you should really learn and understand the theory of what's called the long tail when it comes to your SEO or search engine optimization. And what the long tail basically is, it means the more niche or specific your keyword search is, the better chance you have of showing up high in the search engines. So in other words, see this search here, Sunny Isles homes for sale near a dog park. There's not a ton of competition here because it's a very specific keyword, okay? So let's just explain how this works. And kind of the idea is you can fight and fight and fight trying to get on page 1 for homes for sale in your town, okay? But the problem is when something is that popular, the huge companies are going to own it. You cannot beat out Zillow and Trulia and Realtor.com and Remax and all these companies that have somebody working on their SEO 24/7. And they're putting out so much content on a daily basis, you really can't compete with them for the major stuff, okay, kind of the left side of this chart. But if you kind of focus on the long tail, the more niche local keywords, you can actually get more business out of the long tail than you could out of the really popular stuff. So to kind of give you an example of how this plays out on the search engines. If I do the search Miami, Florida homes for sale, last month there's 18,300,000 results competing for that keyword phrase. And if you look at every single result on page 1, other than the ones that have the green ad word next to it, because those are paid advertisements, then all the results on page 1, Realtor.com, Zillow, and Trulia, The big, huge companies will own page one for a major keyword search with tons of competition. Now let's make it a little bit more niche. North Miami Beach, Florida, homes for sale by downtown. Now we've dropped down from 18 million sites competing down to 3 million, which is still a lot, okay? And you can see still the whole homepage is owned by the major companies. Zillow, Realtor.com, Trulia, all still own the first page. But now let's make it even more local and more niche. Sunny Isles, Florida, homes for sale near a dog park. Now we're down to 374,000 sites competing, and now we have 2 local sites on the homepage. Yes, Zillow and Trulia are still there, but now we have 2 local companies on page 1 without spending money or doing anything crazy because they focused on the long tail. So what this means is you're going to waste your time trying to fight for homes for sale in your town or any major search. You really got to think of how can I identify local keywords I can win with, more niche stuff. And then you want to build those into your site and use those every way you can to kind of set yourself apart for local and niche. Okay, so that's the whole theory of the long tail is you have a better chance of winning when it's niched out and it's local. Tip number 8 is whether you like this or not, you've got to do registration on your own site. And you also might want to think, what kind of incentive can I create for the user? So first of all, I always say you need to think about what can you add to your site for stickiness. Stickiness are things you can put on the site to get somebody to come back again and again. So your homepage should be very visual. You can do things like having a featured property slideshow. You can have a little mini search box built into your site. We talked about especially the single bar is the trend. Doing registration, all these things create incentive for somebody to come back. And changes of your site, new content is the biggest thing. That's why blogging is so important for repeat visit. But when it comes to registration, a lot of realtors resist the registration. My point is you got to get over that concern, okay? Because your search on your site is your gold mine. That's where almost all leads come from in this industry is the property search. That's what the customer is willing to sign up for. So first of all, definitely do registration. But I always say explain why somebody needs to register on your site and reward them. Explain the perks they'll get out of it. If it's just register properties, they're going to think you're a total jerk and they're going to leave and go somewhere else. But if you tell them, hey, by registering, you're going to get all these extra perks. I'll send you updates of listings every time new ones hit the market. I'll send you free reports, which I'll probably do anyway if we work together, right? So if I give you a perk, that's a possible thing where you're not going to go somewhere else. And in addition to this, you also might want to think about how you want to do your registration. If you do what's called forced registration, which means on their first visit, you hit them up right away, again, you're right back to being a total jerk and they're going to leave right away because they'll go somewhere they don't have to register on their first visit. But if a vendor you're using says, no, we have options where we can let someone play for a little while, maybe we'll track them based on number of visits to the site. First 2 visits are free, on the 3rd visit we'll ask them to register, or the number of listings they click into. If you let somebody play a little while, they're more likely to register on the site. And another little bonus for you is the Facebook login or social logins. I'm sure you've seen many sites before where it says create an account by typing in your info or just click in and log in with your Facebook account, which is really becoming the standard way to create logins all over the internet. The customer just thinks one less password to remember. I'm click and I'm in. They don't realize you get their real name and their real info, their contact info. And any site that has a social login gets 88% more leads than sites that don't. So it's another little bonus you should talk to with your vendors. Also, just think of what other forms could you add or things you're going to do in your business anyway. You might just do a CMA for somebody local. You might go out and do neighborhood reports or do a relocation pack for somebody outside the area. So think, what else could I use that I'm already doing as an incentive to add to the registration? Step number 9, you got to track everything and you got to follow up quickly. So this is where good CRM systems come into play. A CRM is a customer relationship management system. It's a system that ties into your site that tracks every visitor and sends email reminders and sends them out drip campaigns and everything like that. Okay, so having a good CRM system tied into your site helps you track those leads and follow up with them. But here's the deal. Most CRM systems are traditional, meaning they only track people who register on your sites. Less than 2% of people will register. So, and then you set up drip emails, which are becoming less and less effective each year. Some of the newer, better vendors are doing what's called cookie tracking active engagement, which means the second somebody goes to your site, even if they don't register, we'll drop a cookie, a file on their machine, and now we can create a lead and a profile in your system of this person. We may not know their real life name is Mary Johnson, but we know she's coming from Texas. We know she's been to our site 5 times and everything she's done on the site. And then you typically have chat tools built into the site that allow you to try to communicate with the customer before they've even signed up for a lead as an account. So some of the vendors that are doing this, you get more leads and better tracking. Okay. And then the other part of it is you got to follow up as fast as possible. The longer you wait to get back to somebody, the better chance they have of leaving, going somewhere else. So if you, and this is actually updated 2015, 49% of customers expect an immediate response to an online contact. Once you add up the 4-hour option, it was up to 97%. So you got to be thinking getting back to people in minutes, not hours these days. In fact, a 5-minute response has a 100% chance higher of conversion than a 30-minute response. So it really shows your response time is very important. But when you respond to them, it's all about getting back to them as quickly as possible and being very polite and professional, but not being aggressive. If you try to do things too quickly, try to get a meeting with them right away, a lot of them will get scared and go somewhere else. And then tip number 10 is if you want your website to succeed, you've got to guarantee it succeeds. In other words, websites typically don't have traffic unless you're buying that. So you might want to factor in a marketing budget, whether it's doing pay-per-click ads out on the search engines like Google and Bing, okay? And here you get to pick your keywords and you get to control the whole budget for it, okay? Your major ones there are Google and Microsoft. Or if you do it out on social media, Facebook a few months ago added the ability to have your ad either click to your own website or have it click to your Facebook business page. So if your goal is getting traffic to your own website, now you can use Facebook advertising for that as well. And Facebook ads are very targeted and not very expensive at all to get you good exposure. And then one last little quick bonus for you is if you really want your website to succeed, and I always tell people if there's one thing you should be doing in your business these days you're not doing, it's definitely video. Google is predicting 70% of all searches next year by 2017 will be for videos, not for websites. Video is really overtaking the internet, and it's also your best chance to show up on page 1 of a search engine. 53 times more likely than a website is. There's just way less competition when it comes to videos, okay? And customers are using videos in so many different ways. This is a study from NAR. I mean, here's a good example. 86% of consumers looked at a video of a property, of a community before they moved there. And that's something that a company like Zillow can't do. They can't send someone out and do videos of every community in your area, but it is an opportunity for a realtor to do. So video is really, there's not a lot of competition here. This study shows you customers expect the realtors to do video and realtors aren't doing it. There's not a lot of competition and it's your best chance to show up high on the search engines and compete with the big companies. And then of course, the obvious place to put your videos is YouTube. It's not only the biggest video site by far, it's the #2 search engine. Okay, so that's just a little bonus tip is you can create a YouTube account and create channels on there to post your videos to. Okay, and the second you put a video on YouTube, you now can promote it outside of YouTube. You can put that video out on Facebook, you can email it out, you can build it into your own website with the embed code. It's very easy to promote videos once they're on YouTube. Because the truth is, at the end of the day, I always say, you, the website owner, are the ultimate factor if your website succeeds because you need to do something to drive traffic to your site these days. So that's all for this webinar. Of course, I'm going to open it up now for any questions you guys might have, and I know some of them have been posting it in the chat throughout the session. If you want to get this presentation or just check out reti.us in general, you can go to reti.us/students, and you'll see, click on my face to get my classes, and you can see there's a lot of discounts for different industry vendors that we have for our members. And just check out the site. Our site's awesome. We have hundreds of videos on how to do everything. We do new webinars every single week. And in addition to that, we have just, free trial period. You can start taking in the site all you want. So again, I'm going to now kind of conclude the presentation part and open everything up to questions.